"Fire, I'll give you all my land. Just make me a mother." The abandoned bride pleaded to the rancher. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly, without joy. The sun rose over the fields just like any other day, spreading soft light across the land she had inherited from her parents. Birds sang, cows moved slowly in the distance, and the old farmhouse stood ready to welcome guests. Everything looked normal, but inside her heart, there was a strange heaviness she could not explain. She woke up before dawn, unable to sleep. Her hands trembled as she touched the simple dress hanging by the window. It was not expensive, but she had chosen it with care. She had dreamed of this day for years. Not because of luxury or attention, but because she believed this marriage would finally give her what she wanted most: a family, a child to hold, a future that felt complete. Her relatives began arriving early. Some brought food, some brought smiles, and some brought curiosity. Everyone in the village knew this wedding mattered. She was not just a bride, she was a woman with land, property, and independence. Many people believed her groom was lucky. Few cared whether she was loved. As the hours passed, excitement slowly turned into confusion. The groom was supposed to arrive before noon. Noon came and went. Guests whispered, checking their phones, looking down the road again and again. She sat quietly in a small room, her dress now heavy on her shoulders. Each minute felt longer than the last. At first, she told herself he was late because of traffic or nerves. She smiled weakly when her cousin tried to comfort her, but deep inside, fear had begun to grow. She remembered small signs she had ignored: the sudden distance, the short replies, the excuses. She had chosen hope instead of truth. By afternoon, the truth became impossible to hide. Someone received a message. Someone else made a call. Faces turned serious. Conversation stopped when she entered the room. Finally, her uncle sat beside her and spoke in a low voice. The groom was not coming. He had left town. He had chosen another life, another woman, far away from this land and this responsibility. Her world went silent. She did not cry at first. Her body felt empty, like all emotion had been drained at once. The guests slowly left, some offering awkward words, others avoiding her eyes completely. By evening, the farmhouse that had been full of life became quiet again. Decorations hung uselessly. Food went untouched. The wedding that was supposed to change her life disappeared like it had never existed. That night, she sat alone on the wooden steps outside the house. The air was cool. The fields were dark. She felt smaller than she ever had before. Being left before marriage was not just heartbreak in her world, it was shame. People would talk. They always did. A woman abandoned was considered weak, unwanted, broken. In the days that followed, the whispers began. At the market, women lowered their voices when she passed. Some showed false sympathy, others quiet judgment. A few even blamed her, suggesting she must have done something wrong. No one asked how she felt. They only asked why it happened. Her family tried to help, but their help came with pressure. They reminded her that time was passing, that a woman alone would not survive long without a husband. That land needed an heir, that without a child, everything her parents had worked for would eventually disappear. She listened, but their words hurt more than they helped. She had already lost her dream once. Now everyone was asking her to give it up completely. At night, she often lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about motherhood. It was not just a wish. It was something she felt deep in her soul. She wanted to guide a child, protect them, give them the love she never fully received herself. But now, the dream felt farther away than ever. She tried to stay strong. She worked the land during the day, managing workers, repairing fences, making decisions her father once made. But the work was heavy and loneliness followed her everywhere. Meals tasted bland. Even the open fields felt like cages. One afternoon, while checking the boundary fence, she noticed the ranch next to hers. The man who owned it was working quietly, fixing a gate. He was known in the area but not closely. A widower, A man who spoke little and kept to himself. People said he was honest, serious, and uninterested in village drama. She watched him for a moment. There was something calm about the way he worked, something steady. He noticed her and nodded politely. No curiosity, no pity, just respect. That simple gesture stayed with her longer than she expected. As weeks passed, her situation did not improve. Marriage proposals came, but none felt right. Some men wanted her land, some wanted control. None cared about her heart or her dreams. Each proposal felt like another reminder that she was being measured, not valued. One evening, after another tense family discussion, she walked outside and looked across her fields. Everything she owned stood before her, acres of land, a strong home, a future others wanted. Yet she felt empty. What good was land if her life had no warmth? What good was independence if it came with isolation? That was the moment something shifted inside her. Desperation mixed with determination. She realized that waiting for society's approval had only brought her pain. If she wanted motherhood, she might have to make a decision no one would understand. Her thoughts returned to the quiet rancher next door, a man untouched by gossip. A man who lived by his own rules. She did not know him well, but she knew one thing: he treated her like a human being, not a broken bride. The idea scared her. It felt wrong. It felt bold, but it also felt honest. That night, she stood by her window, staring into the darkness, knowing her life had reached a turning point. The wedding that never happened had destroyed her old dreams, but it had also forced her to face a truth she had been avoiding. If she wanted a future, she would have to fight for it, even if it meant making a choice that changed everything. And for the first time since the abandoned wedding day, she did not feel weak. She felt ready. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly became months. Life did not pause for her pain. The land still needed care, animals still needed feeding, and workers still needed direction. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise and forced herself to move forward. She tied her hair back, wore simple clothes, and stepped into the role her parents once carried with ease. On the outside, she looked strong. On the inside, she was quietly breaking. Managing the land alone was harder than she had expected. There were meetings with suppliers, arguments between workers, broken tools, and unexpected expenses. Many men she dealt with did not hide their surprise. Some spoke to her kindly but slowly, as if she would not understand. Others tried to take advantage of her situation, offering unfair deals, thinking she was too vulnerable to resist. Each day became a test of her patience and courage. At home, the silence was loud. The house felt too big for one person. At night, she ate alone, listening to the sound of the wind brushing past the windows. Sometimes she set 2 plates without realizing it, then quietly put one away. Those moments hurt the most. They reminded her of the life she thought she would have by now. Her family visited often, but their concern came with expectations. Her aunt spoke gently but firmly about remarriage. Her uncle reminded her that land without an heir would invite trouble. They spoke as if her value was tied to what she could produce, not who she was. She listened respectfully, but their words weighed heavily on her heart. One afternoon, her mother's sister sat beside her and spoke honestly. She said the world was not kind to women who stood alone for too long, that people would question her strength, her choices, her worth. She advised her to accept one of the proposals waiting, even if love was missing. Stability matters more, she said. That night, the woman cried quietly in her room. She was not against marriage. She was against losing herself again. Proposals continued to arrive. Some men came with gifts and smiles, but their eyes scanned the land more than her face. Others spoke about control, rules, and expectations before even asking how she felt. One man suggested she sign papers early to avoid future confusion. She refused them all. Each refusal made the pressure stronger. Meanwhile, the quiet rancher next door remained unchanged. Every day, she saw him working with calm focus. He fixed fences, guided cattle, and managed his ranch without noise or display. He did not attend village gatherings or involve himself in gossip. People respected him, even if they did not fully understand him. One day, a storm hit unexpectedly. Heavy rain flooded part of her land, damaging a section of fencing. Workers struggled and panic spread. Without hesitation, the rancher arrived with his tools and a few helpers. He did not ask questions or wait for permission. He simply helped. They worked side by side in the mud, fixing what they could before nightfall. When it was done, she thanked him. He nodded and said it was the right thing to do, nothing more. That moment stayed with her. Over time, small interactions followed. A brief greeting in the morning, a shared look across the fields. Sometimes he offered practical advice, never speaking down to her. Sometimes she brought extra produce to his ranch, leaving it quietly. There were no expectations, no hidden meanings, just simple human decency. For the first time in months, she felt seen without being judged. Still, the weight of her situation did not disappear. The village continued to watch her closely. Any conversation she had was noticed. Any visitor was questioned. Freedom came with a price, and she paid it daily. One evening, after another difficult family discussion, she walked through her land slowly. The sunset painted the sky in deep orange and gold. This land had been her parents' pride. It carried their sweat, their dreams, their sacrifices. She loved it deeply, but she knew love alone would not protect it forever. She thought about children, about teaching them to walk across these fields, about laughter filling the house again. The longing was so strong it almost hurt to breathe. That night, she could not sleep. Her thoughts circled around one truth she could no longer ignore. Society would not wait for her to heal. Time would not pause until she was ready. If she continued like this, her choices would soon be taken away from her. She did not want a loveless marriage. She did not want control or pity. She wanted dignity. She wanted motherhood. She wanted peace. Her mind returned again to the rancher. He was not perfect and he was not romantic, but he was honest. He respected her. He did not need her land to survive, and he lived outside the rules that were suffocating her. The thought frightened her. It felt too bold, too risky. But it also felt real. Days passed as she struggled with her thoughts. She watched him from a distance, noticing how he treated his workers fairly, how he spoke little but acted with care. People trusted him. Children waved at him. Animals responded calmly to his presence. One afternoon, she found him repairing a water line near the boundary. She stood there longer than necessary, unsure what to say. He noticed her hesitation and asked if everything was fine. His voice was calm, not intrusive. For a moment, she almost spoke, almost shared her fears, but the words felt too heavy. She simply thanked him again for helping during the storm and walked away. That night, she sat alone at her table, staring at the papers that represented her land. Numbers, signatures, value. Everything people wanted from her, and yet none of it could give her what she wanted most. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not only from pain, they were from clarity. She realized something important. She was done waiting for life to be kind. She would choose her own path, even if others misunderstood it. The next morning, she woke with a strange calm. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She dressed simply and walked toward the boundary between her land and the rancher's. Each step felt heavy but determined. She did not know how the conversation would end. She did not know if he would be shocked, offended, or angry. But she knew one thing: silence had already cost her too much. As she approached his ranch, she took a deep breath. Her heart pounded, but her back remained straight. This was not weakness. This was survival. The woman who had once waited quietly for a groom who never came was gone. In her place stood someone ready to ask for her future on her own terms. She stood at the edge of the boundary for a long moment before stepping forward. The grass was still wet from morning dew, and the air smelled clean, like a new beginning that had not yet decided what it would become. Her heart beat fast, but she kept walking. Turning back would only return her to the same quiet pain she had lived with for months. The rancher was near the barn, checking supplies. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. His face showed surprise, but not discomfort. He waited, giving her space to speak first. That simple patience made her chest tighten. They exchanged polite greetings. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt heavy, like stones she had to lift one by one. She finally asked if they could talk somewhere quiet. He nodded and led her to a bench near the fence, where the land stretched wide and open. She sat, folded her hands, and stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, though her insides trembled. She told him the truth. Not all at once, but slowly. She spoke about the wedding that never happened, about the whispers, about the pressure from family and the fear of losing her land and her future. She spoke about her wish to become a mother, a wish that had not faded even after everything else had fallen apart. He listened without interrupting. He did not judge or rush her. His eyes stayed on the fields, as if he understood that some stories were easier to hear without direct eye contact. When she finished, there was a long silence. The wind moved the grass. Somewhere, an animal called out. Life continued around them, calm and unaware of how much courage it had taken for her to speak. Then she said the words she had practiced in her mind 100 times. She told him she was willing to give him all her land, everything. In return, she asked for help becoming a mother and protection from the judgment that followed her everywhere. She made it clear she was not asking for romance or promises of forever. She was asking for honesty, respect, and a chance to build a future with dignity. As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt exposed, vulnerable. She waited for rejection, anger, or shock. The rancher stood up slowly and took a few steps away. He did not speak right away. When he finally turned back, his face was serious, almost troubled. He told her that what she was asking was not small, that it involved lives, values, and consequences. He said he would never take advantage of someone's pain, no matter what was offered. He asked if she truly understood the weight of her request. She nodded. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not look away. She told him she had thought about it every night, that she knew people would judge her, that she knew she might be misunderstood. But she also knew she could not keep living in fear and waiting for permission to want more from life. Her honesty moved him more than the offer itself. He spoke about his own life then, about losing his wife years ago, about choosing solitude not because he hated people, but because he needed peace. He said he had built his life carefully, avoiding drama and deals that could harm others. He did not want power over her land or her choices. He told her he needed time to think. The words were not rejection, but they were not acceptance either. Still, she felt relief. He had listened. He had taken her seriously. That alone felt like a small victory. She returned home that day feeling drained but lighter. For the first time, she had spoken her truth out loud. Whatever happened next, she would not regret that. Days passed slowly. She focused on work, but her mind often wandered. Every sound made her wonder if he would come. Every knock made her heart jump. At night, doubts returned. Had she gone too far? Had she misunderstood his kindness? The village noticed her unease. Rumors shifted. People sensed change before it arrived. Some guessed she was considering another proposal. Others claimed she had already made a deal. She ignored them all. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the rancher arrived at her house. He stood at the gate, waiting instead of walking in. That small gesture showed respect. They sat at the same table where she often ate alone. The house felt different with another presence. Not crowded, just warmer. He spoke carefully. He said he had thought deeply about her request. He had weighed his values against her need. And while he could not accept her land, he was willing to consider a different path. He explained his conditions clearly. There would be no secrets or pressure. Everything would be agreed upon openly. No one would be used or controlled. Decisions would be mutual. And most importantly, she would never be treated as an object or a bargain. She listened, her breath held tight in her chest. He said that if they moved forward, it would be as partners, not owners. Whatever happened would be done with respect and responsibility. If at any point either felt uncomfortable, they would stop. Tears streamed down her face, but she smiled through them. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. Not because the future was certain, but because it was honest. She agreed to his conditions immediately. Not because she was desperate, but because they aligned with what she wanted all along. They decided to take things slowly. There would be conversations, planning, and understanding before any step was taken. He insisted on that. He wanted to make sure her decision came from strength, not fear. As days turned into weeks, they spoke often, not just about plans, but about life, childhood memories, losses, dreams they had buried. Through these talks, something unexpected began to form, not romance, but trust. The village noticed their increased interaction. People watched, whispered, and speculated. Some disapproved. Others stayed silent. Neither of them explained anything. They owed no one answers. Working together became natural. He helped her with tasks on her land. She offered help when he needed it. Meals were shared sometimes, quiet and comfortable. There was no pretending, no performance. She felt herself healing in ways she did not expect. The shame she had carried began to fade. She was no longer just the abandoned bride. She was a woman making choices. Still, fear did not disappear completely. Some nights she lay awake wondering if she was making a mistake, but every morning she woke with purpose. That mattered more. One evening, as they walked along the fence line, she thanked him. Not for agreeing, but for respecting her. He replied simply that respect should never be rare. That moment stayed with her. The agreement they were building was not perfect, but it was real. It was rooted in truth, not desperation. And as the days moved forward, she realized something important. She had not just asked for help becoming a mother. She had reclaimed control over her life, and whatever came next would be faced with open eyes and steady strength. Life slowly began to change, not with loud moments, but with quiet shifts that felt deeper than words. Their agreement stayed private, known only to them. Outwardly, nothing dramatic had happened. Yet inside her world, everything felt different. For the first time in many months, she woke up without dread sitting heavy on her chest. They continued to meet often, sometimes to work, sometimes just to talk. The rancher never crossed boundaries or rushed anything. He spoke carefully, listened closely, and treated every decision as shared ground. That steadiness helped her breathe again. She no longer felt like she was standing alone against the world. Working together became part of daily life. He helped her organize the land better, teaching her practical methods he had learned over years of experience. She learned how to manage resources more wisely and gained confidence in her decisions. Slowly, people noticed her change. She walked straighter. Her voice was calmer. Her eyes no longer carried constant fear. The village, of course, noticed everything. Whispers returned, but this time they sounded different. People could not easily label her anymore. She was not hiding. She was not begging for approval. She was simply living. Some admired her strength quietly. Others felt uncomfortable because they could not control her story. A few neighbors tried to ask questions, but she answered politely and briefly. She no longer felt the need to explain her life. That freedom felt powerful. The rancher faced his own challenges. People questioned his intentions. Some hinted that he should stay away from her situation to protect his reputation. He listened, but he did not change his behavior. He believed that doing the right thing mattered more than pleasing others. One afternoon, while they were repairing an old storage shed together, a sudden storm forced them to take shelter inside. Rain fell hard, beating against the roof. They sat on wooden crates, waiting it out. The moment felt calm and natural, not awkward. She spoke about her fears then, Not about the village, but about herself. She admitted she was scared of hoping too much, scared of trusting again, scared that life might take something from her once more. He listened quietly and then said something simple. He said fear did not mean weakness. It meant she cared deeply, and caring was not something to be ashamed of. Those words stayed with her long after the rain stopped. As time passed, they shared more meals, sometimes at her house, sometimes at his ranch. The silence between them felt comfortable, not empty. They did not pretend to be something they were not. That honesty created a bond stronger than rushed promises ever could. Her family noticed the change too. At first, they were cautious. They asked questions carefully, watching for signs of trouble. She answered honestly but firmly. She told them she was making decisions for her own future and asked for trust. Some relatives struggled to accept it. Others, seeing her renewed strength, softened. They realized she was no longer a woman waiting to be saved. She was building her own life. There were difficult days too. Days when old memories returned without warning. Days when a comment from the village reopened wounds. On those days, she allowed herself to feel hurt without letting it control her. The rancher never tried to fix her pain. He simply stood beside her, steady and present. That presence mattered more than any words. One evening, they walked along the edge of the land as the sun set. The sky glowed softly and the fields looked peaceful. She spoke about her parents then, about how they had taught her to stand firm and work honestly. She wondered aloud if they would be proud of her choices. He said he believed they would be. Not because she followed tradition, but because she followed truth. Those words brought tears to her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release. Their partnership grew stronger through everyday moments, through shared work, through quiet understanding, through respect that never faded. They learned each other's habits, moods, and silences. They learned when to speak and when to let quiet do the work. The village slowly adjusted. When people saw consistency, they stopped expecting scandal. Life moved on. Some still whispered, but many simply accepted that she had found a new way forward. One day, a young woman from the village came to her for advice. She was struggling with pressure and fear, unsure how to make her own choices. The abandoned bride listened and spoke gently, offering understanding instead of judgment. In that moment, she realized something important. Her pain had not destroyed her. It had shaped her into someone stronger. The rancher saw that change too. He respected her not just as a partner, but as a person who had faced hardship and grown wiser. He trusted her judgment and valued her strength. They discussed the future carefully. No rush. No demands, just thoughtful planning. Whatever came next would be faced together with honesty and care. One night, after a long day of work, she stood alone on her porch, looking across the land. The air was cool and the stars shone brightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful. She thought about how far she had come, from being left alone on her wedding day to standing here now, grounded and hopeful. The journey had been painful, but it had also revealed her strength. She understood now that partnership was not about control or rescue. It was about choosing to walk forward together, even when the path was uncertain. Whatever the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer defined by what she had lost. She was defined by what she was building. Time continued to move forward, steady and patient, just like the life they were building. Nothing happened suddenly. There were no dramatic moments that changed everything overnight. Instead, change arrived slowly, through consistency, care, and shared responsibility. Their partnership had settled into something strong and dependable. The land flourished under better planning. Crops grew healthier. Animals were well cared for. Workers respected her leadership more than ever before. They saw her confidence, her fairness, and her calm way of handling problems. She was no longer questioned as often. Results spoke louder than doubt. Inside the house, warmth returned. Laughter found its way back into the rooms, sometimes quiet, sometimes unexpected. Shared meals became routine. Conversations flowed easily, even when silence took over. She no longer felt alone at the end of the day. The rancher, too, had changed. Though he remained quiet by nature, there was a softness in him that had not been there before. He smiled more. He allowed himself rest. He spoke about the future without hesitation. The life he had once closed himself off from was slowly opening again. The village noticed these changes clearly now. People who once whispered began to greet them normally. Some even expressed respect. Others kept their opinions to themselves. Life moved on, and with it, the attention shifted elsewhere. What once felt like constant judgment faded into the background. Her family also came to accept her path. They saw that she was stable, confident, and fulfilled in ways she had not been before. Over time, concern turned into trust. They realized that forcing her into traditional choices would have only broken her spirit. Allowing her to choose had saved it. One afternoon, as she worked in the fields, she paused and rested her hand against her stomach, lost in thought. Her heart felt full but also nervous. Life had taught her to be careful with hope. Still, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with small footsteps, gentle laughter, and bedtime stories told under soft light. That future no longer felt impossible. The rancher noticed her quiet moment and asked if she was tired. She smiled and shook her head. She said she was just thinking. He did not push for answers. He simply stood beside her, steady as always. Weeks passed, and then one day a simple truth became clear to her. It arrived without fear, without panic, just certainty. Her heart filled with emotion, not shock. She knew her life was entering a new chapter. When she told him, she expected many reactions: surprise, silence, questions. What she did not expect was the calm smile that appeared on his face. He listened carefully, then took a long breath. He said they would move forward together, thoughtfully and responsibly, just as they had done with everything else. That moment stayed with her forever. They took time. They planned carefully. There was no rush to announce anything. They focused on health, stability, and peace. The future was treated with respect, not excitement alone. Every step was taken with intention. When the village finally learned the truth, reactions were mixed. Some were surprised. Some smiled quietly. Others chose silence. But none of it mattered the way it once had. She was no longer living for approval. Her days became full in new ways. She balanced work with rest, strength with gentleness, responsibility with care. She learned to ask for help when needed and offer it freely when she could. The rancher proved himself not through grand gestures but through everyday actions. He showed up. He listened. He protected peace instead of pride. That reliability meant everything. As the months passed, she reflected often on her journey. She remembered the abandoned wedding day clearly. The humiliation, the loneliness, the fear that had once consumed her. That woman felt distant now, like a version of herself she had outgrown. Pain had changed her, but it had not destroyed her. One evening she stood at the edge of the land, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft colors. The field stretched wide before her, filled with life and promise. The rancher stood beside her, quiet and present. She realized then that motherhood was not only about bringing life into the world. It was about nurturing, protecting, guiding, and loving with courage. It was about building a safe place where life could grow. She had already begun doing that. The house, once silent, now held warmth. The land, once heavy with expectation, now felt like opportunity. Her heart, once broken, now felt strong enough to hold both joy and responsibility. She had not traded her land for motherhood. She had claimed both with dignity. And in doing so, she had rewritten her story, not as the abandoned bride, but as a woman who chose her future, stood by her truth, and built a life rooted in respect, patience, and quiet strength. The road ahead would still have challenges. Life always did. But she was no longer afraid of them. She had learned that real security did not come from promises or approval. It came from courage, and that courage had led her home.